Well, I promise we'll get out of here by 3. It was Lewis Grizzard who pointed out, the game of life is a lot like football. You have to tackle your problems, block your fears, and score your points when you get the opportunity. So today we're looking at the opportunities we have to return to love in times when we may feel benched on the sidelines of life and feeling separate from God, others, and even ourselves. We're looking at a way we can return to the home of love inside that is always here, one thought away. Mahatma Gandhi once said, "Where there is love, there is life." And when you are aware of love's presence, don't you feel more alive? Your senses are heightened, and oh, what a beautiful morning. We feel it, right, on many levels. So we all have the capacity to love greatly, to be God's love in action. And so let us affirm that right now with these statements. If you choose, please join me. Together, I am divine life ever renewing. I am divine love ever expressing. I am the ever-flowing vibration of love's possibility. Let's make your cells do a happy dance. Let's affirm this again. I am divine life ever renewing. I am divine love ever expressing. I am the ever-flowing vibration of love's possibility. Let's do that last line, only love's presence. I am the ever-flowing vibration of love's presence. Yes, allowing it out, what is already within you. So we know these truths at our core, right? We know this, but sometimes we forget, and we can have moments of spiritual amnesia, where we forget when obstacles come up, obstacles such as making assumptions or holding a grudge, which in any relationship can cause confusion, conflict, drama, separation. Remember the story about a couple who was having breakfast on Valentine's Day, and the wife was in the habit of telling her husband her dreams, and she said, "I had the best dream last night. I dreamed that you gave me that beautiful ruby necklace I showed you at the mall." She said, "What do you think that dream means?" And he said, "Tonight you'll find out." So all day she was cleaning, she was going to work, came home. She was so excited that it was going to be the most special Valentine's Day ever. And then her husband came home, kissed her, gave her the gift that was wrapped about this big. She said, So she opened it. Big smile on her face, and then she tore the wrapper off and she looked, and it was a book, The Secret Interpretation of Dreams. So I think it was George Bernard Shaw who said the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. We'll talk more about communication and building our communication skills next week. So another obstacle on the path to love, to being love, that greater love, is the unwillingness to forgive. Rumi, Persian poet, said, "Your task is not to seek for love, but to seek and find all of the barriers within yourself that you have built against it." So today we're looking at forgiveness as a path to return to love, to mend relationships, and to heal our hearts. I like this from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Forgiveness is not an occasional act, it is a permanent attitude, constant attitude. And he added, we must develop and maintain the capacity to forgive. So this is a skill that we can develop. Because I don't know about you, but I grew up in a household where it was the complete opposite. Where I heard from my family, don't get mad, get even. I remember us going, we went on Sunday drives, 5 kids and my dad, and we would drive past, he was an architect, so we would drive past his buildings and the Bay Area. And I remember this one building we went by where my dad had a unsatisfactory exchange with someone who hired him. I think he didn't get paid or something. And my mom would turn to the back of the seat, say, okay, kids, give him the raspberries. And of course, all the kids did it. Got it sprayed all over the windows. So this inclination to forgive might not come naturally. You know, we might have to unlearn some things we learned growing up and have the willingness to develop this skill, and compassion. So Jesus taught that forgiveness was not a one-time deal, but rather a process that requires persistence. In the book of Matthew, chapter 18, when Peter asked Jesus, how many times should we forgive? 7 times? Because 7 is a number of completion. And Jesus said, not 7 times, I tell you, but 70 times 7. So the symbology in that is 7 is completion and 0 means starting over. So you think you're finished, but no, you have to start over. As many times as it takes to feel at peace with the situation or the person, or at least feel neutral with it. I like to think of it as, my elbow. It's just there. I don't really think of it, but it's part of my experience. And when things happen, when we get to that place where you can think of something that happened that used to make you mad, and it's just like, it's there. It's there, but there's no energy behind it. So it's like peeling the layers of an onion, right? So forgive as many times as it takes. Because we're human. We will blunder, we will stumble, we will press each other's buttons. And so it's really important to forgive ourselves. And also to forgive ourselves for not being all things to all people. Has anyone tried that? Yeah. Can't be all things to all people. And to forgive others for not being all things to us. A good question with this work is to ask ourselves, who do I need to forgive for not being God? For not knowing my every need, my every thought, my every want. So as we go through this lesson on forgiveness today, just notice who or what pops up in your mind with that word, forgiveness. And we're going to have a forgiveness meditation at the end. So if you're willing to release some things, we'll have that opportunity at the end. Notice who comes to mind, and notice what your face does, when you think of it. The body doesn't lie. You can feel it in the gut or in the expression. So just to gently observe. One of our 5 unity principles says that the Christ is within every person. So the question naturally arises, well, if that's true, then why do people behave so badly? And the book we're studying, we're having a great time in the class, by the way, and the 5 principles that we're studying, the author offers this explanation, which I really like. She says, Perhaps we can be divine, growing, changing, evolving expressions of God and still make mistakes, like a toddler who falls down and learning to walk. And she adds, perhaps we contain the potential for expressing perfectly, just as an acorn contains the potential for an oak tree, but has to grow and develop and to allow that perfection to express. So we can enjoy every stage of the journey. And isn't that why we come here? To know God more, to know who we are as divine beings of a divine creator, to know that more. Well, fortunately, we have a forgiveness instinct. And psychologist Michael McCullough has researched both revenge and forgiveness. And he points out that we are hardwired psychologically for both revenge and forgiveness, but our wiring for forgiveness is stronger. That's good news, right? And if you think about it, forgiveness, the ability for humans to forgive, has supported evolution. Will we still exist if that wasn't in place, you know? So forgiveness has allowed humans to cooperate with each other and to make something new that we couldn't do by ourselves. So isn't this needed in our world right now? Calling forth that forgiveness instinct and willingness to communicate, to find common ground. Myrtle Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, I love what she says about forgiveness. Should one always be sweet and forgiving? Yes, but not necessarily soft and without backbone and individual conviction. Be sweet. It is the expression of Christ's ideas in your consciousness. Be forgiving. Because the true light reveals the fact that others are only children experimenting. So this perspective helps us with compassion, right? Having compassion for others and for ourselves when we don't act like that perfect Christ expression sometimes. And the mercy and forgiveness we want others to give us, we can extend to others and extend to ourselves. That's the human in me. I've heard that before. Human and divine. You are, we are. So this is the work of the soul, right? To let go of the ego being in control and being right at all costs. Boy, you can see the problems that causes, right? So I think there's some myths about what forgiveness is and what it isn't. So let's talk about that. Well, forgiveness is not giving in to another person's inappropriate actions. It's not condoning hurtful behavior. It's not granting permission for the action to occur again. And it's not a sign of weakness. It's not about being a doormat. And it doesn't depend on whether the other person is sorry or apologizes. That's a tough one, right? I've heard people say, and I think I've said it myself, well, I'll forgive them if they apologize, if they know what they did wrong. But often, I think it was Buddy Hackett that said, you're crying over something, they're out dancing. So we know that forgiveness is very good for us. It's good for our bodies, our minds, and our spirits. And it reduces anger, stress, depression, and it increases hopefulness and self-esteem, and improves our ability to connect spiritually. So all it takes is the willingness to forgive, because we forgive to set ourselves free. We don't really forgive for the other, but to set ourselves free. And it helps to heal relationships. So I was fascinated by this study that Fred Luskin has written a lot about forgiveness, and he notes a medical study that was very startling, that showed that higher rates of cancer and cardiovascular disease were found among people who habitually blame others for their problems. And this too really made me stop and think. Even when they imagined not forgiving someone, playing that scene over and over and blaming, they showed negative changes in blood pressure, muscle tension, and immune response. But the flip side of this is good news, because when people imagined forgiving their offender, just imagined it in their mind, physiologically, they showed immediate improvement in cardiovascular, muscular, and their nervous systems. That really speaks to the power of our minds, right? It speaks to the power of our minds to literally constrict our hearts or free our hearts. And we hold that power within us to do that. Release and let go. Della Reese. Some of you may or may not know, she was an ordained Unity minister who, was active in the 1980s and in Los Angeles, and she founded her own church called the Understanding Principles for Better Living, was her church. I like what she has to say. She says, "My idea of forgiveness is letting go of resentment that does not serve your better interest, ridding yourself of negative thoughts. All they do is make you miserable. Believe me, you can fret and fume all you want, but whoever it was that wronged you is not suffering from your anguish whatsoever."
You're out dancing.
Yeah. So good reminder, right? Good reminder. We forgive for ourselves, because forgiveness does include the willingness to have a peaceful heart and to give up thoughts of revenge or an eye for an eye attitude. Forgiveness is also a process that involves the willingness to grow. And it takes courage, doesn't it? It takes courage, to let go of wanting to be right, wanting to hang on to the painful story, the pain in the story. And we know that, it's good to get support, especially for things that happened in the past that may have been traumatic, to get support, professional support with that, as well as spiritual support, because that can take some extra elements. So, has anyone ever found it difficult to forgive? I think as very young children we had no problem. But then somehow in, elementary school that changed. Can you remember the first time your parents or an authority figure, a teacher told you to let it go and forgive when you were wronged? Boy, that was tough. I can remember my lemonade stand when I was about 8, and my parents had to go somewhere, and the kids had to go. So I asked my neighbor, Lisa, "Can you please take over? Here's some change, dimes or whatever." And so we came back a couple hours later, and the lemonade was dumped, and everything was turned over. And as a kid, I remember I was so mad at her, and I chased her to school the next day. All the way to school, and got called into the principal's office. And he said, "You have to stop this behavior." I said, "But you don't understand what she did." And she took the money too. "You have to stop this. You have to let it go. and he had this giant, looked like an oar of a boat. He had this giant paddle on his wall behind him. And this was a different era, I know. Anybody else see that in their school? I don't know. So that was a stronger message than his words, actually. So that was my time when I really remember it was so hard to let it go. But we learn, right? We learn, and she didn't run the lemonade stand again. So sometimes we find it difficult to forgive because we haven't grieved the loss. And usually when there's a need to forgive, there's been some sort of loss. A loss of trust, a loss of relationship, a loss of money, a loss of a dream, or how we thought somebody was, or how we thought this group was, or how we thought things should be or are going to be. So there's a loss there that needs to be grieved. So it's important to grieve the loss, to take time to do that. And that also requires courage and going within, and often getting support as well. I got to practice this last summer when, I think we were still in the parking lot, doing services in the parking lot, and it was a confusing time because we thought we were going to be back in the building. Could we travel or not? I don't know. Things I love to do, couldn't do yet. And I really grappled with the loss of things that I loved to do. And so part of grieving loss is accepting the loss, and then acknowledging the pain of the loss, whether it's a person or something you loved, and then adjusting to a new environment, and then reinvesting your life energy into something positive. And so going through this, and I reluctantly adjusted to the new environment, and I prayed, I took it into prayer, and I said, Spirit, how can I reinvest this energy? What can I do with this in a positive way? And the answer that comes to me was to put beauty into the world. And so this came out of the blue, and I was inspired to create some books and journals and kids' books so people could get in touch with their creativity, their selves with the journals, the coloring books to relax. And so what I've brought today was my therapy from getting through the pandemic is creating those books that are on the back table there. And I share this with you because we each have the ability to ask, as we grieve the losses that I think everyone has had on some level these past 2 years, to go within, to do the healing work, and to ask, Spirit, God, Holy Spirit, how can I reinvest this energy into new life, to put something good back for the confusion, the fear, the tumultuous times? What can I do to put something good back in? Some hope, some light, some beauty. Because you have that ability. And maybe you're doing it now. So how to forgive? There are many ways and many processes and workshops and great books. But a very simple way, if you're willing to forgive, is to take it into prayer and ask to be guided to the right resource or person to assist with that. And if you're ready, a very simple and powerful prayer is this: I forgive, I forgive, I forgive. I release, I release, I release. I let go and let God. I forgive, I forgive, I forgive. I release, I release, I release. I let go, I let God. If we're not quite willing to forgive, we can pray for the willingness to be willing. And if we're not even there yet because whatever has happened is just too painful or too raw or new, we can just set it down and say, Spirit, I can't do this right now, but please love this person for me. And may I know someday peace in my heart about this situation. So wherever we're at, we can begin the road back to love with the healing power of forgiveness. So let's close with the forgiveness prayer. This is taking a line from the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic, and Neil Douglas Klotz has extended it into a full prayer he calls Letting Go, Heartbeat by Heartbeat. And so closing your eyes now with the intention to return to love, let us pray. Holy Spirit, loose the cords of mistakes binding us as we release the strands we hold of others' guilt. Forgive our hidden past, the secret shames, as we consistently forgive what others hide. Lighten our load of secret debts as we relieve others of their need to repay. Erase the inner marks our failures make, just as we scrub our hearts of others' faults. Absorb our frustrated hopes and dreams as we embrace those of others with emptiness. Untangle the knots within so that we can mend our hearts' simple ties to each other. Compost our inner stolen fruit as we forgive others the spoils of their trespassing. And loose the cords of mistakes binding us as we release the strands we hold of others' guilt. And so I am free, and so you are free, and so we all are free. And so it is. Amen.